What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we'll be doing another tier list video. Obviously, you guys really enjoyed the last one. And so we decided we were going to do another one today. And this time we're doing it on NHL goaltending tandems. So, how this is going to work is pretty simple. We're basically just going to go by division and we're going to rank them from 1 to 8, who we think is the best goaltending tandem and who we think is the worst goaltending tandem in each division. As you can see, there's all the goaltenders listed on the tier list. We're only going to be going with the starters. We're not going to put every single goaltender. It's just not worth it. So we're going to go with the starters, but we're going to talk about both goaltenders and the tandem as a whole. So let's just jump right into it with the Atlantic Division. And so who do we think, Zach, should go number one in this tier list for the Atlantic Division?
So for the Atlantic, I would go at number one with the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Cats. For the Panthers duo with Sergei Bobrovsky, obviously, who was lights out in the playoffs last year. It's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, still on the top of his game, and he's going to be backed up by Spencer Knight, who has a chance to rebound last year after spending some time in DA, struggling in the beginning, getting some reps. But he's had kind of intermediate success in years prior, and I think Spencer Knight has an opportunity with the defending champs to rebound, and obviously that would make them a formidable duo this season. I would go with the Panthers at number one.
I agree. I think it's going to be hard to bet against Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, the defending Stanley Cup champs. Bobrovsky played a big role in that, and I think that although they lost Stolarz off free agency this year, I think Spencer Knight's ready to take on the role as the backup. And I think both of them together, I think, is a really good tandem altogether. So I do agree. Number one is the Florida Panthers. At number two, we're going to go with Jeremy Swayman and the Boston Bruins. So obviously with Swayman and the Bruins, the reason he's at number two is because, look, it's Jeremy Swayman. He had a really good playoffs last year, looked really good. I think that ultimately for him, you look at where the team is at and the success that the Bruins have had. A lot of that has to do with, Jeremy Swayman. Yeah, obviously, he was in a duo with Linus Ullmark, but either way, I think Swayman, last year in the playoffs proved that he was capable of taking the reins and being able to run with it. They acquired Joonas Korpisalo in the Linus Ullmark trade. I'm not a huge fan of Korpisalo. However, I have seen in the past that, he can be a good backup and he can be a very good goaltender in a decent tandem situation if he's playing, let's say, 20, 25, maybe 30 games. So it's not a bad idea. And I just think that although the Bruins are not number one, and I think they would have been number one if Ullmark was there, I think number two is fair for the Bruins.
Yeah, I think the question you should ask yourself when evaluating the Bruins tandem is Jeremy Swayman now capable of playing the larger chunk of the games now that Linus Ullmark isn't there anymore? And I think he's definitely has that ability. He showed that they could give him the keys to the castle, and he was their guy pretty much for the entirety of the playoffs last year, except one game against Toronto.
Right.
And he's very much capable. He's in that class, I think, top 10 goalies in this entire league, and I think he'll be ready to take the charge this year. And I think with Korpisalo, well, look, it's no guarantee that he's going to bounce back because his year in Ottawa last year, being the starter, I watched most of Ottawa's games. It was tough to watch at times. There were a lot of blunders, a lot of mishaps, and the consistency level just wasn't there, not even for a stretch of a couple of games. So that was a little worrisome. But I think if you shrink down the size of games that he's got to play this year, he has, stylistically, there are things you love with Korpisalo, and when he's on his game, he could be a showstopper at times. But it's a wait and see. But I think he has a chance to rebound playing in a lesser role this year in Boston, and obviously in front of a team that's going to be more defensively sound than the DJ Smith / Jacques Martin Ottawa Senators last year. So we got Boston at number two, and at number three, I'm gonna put that team, and obviously my favorite team, the Ottawa Senators, with Linus Ullmark now the big trade with the Bruins in the beginning of right at the beginning of the offseason. I think Linus Ullmark is going to give them that stability in the net. He's in that conversation of the top tier goalies in the league. Won the Vezina 2 years ago, was very stable for Boston, and obviously was the other counterpart to Jeremy Swayman's great tandem there in Boston. He's a top tier goalie, and he's got a pretty decent backup partner in Anton Forsberg, who, despite all of the goalie issues in Ottawa, with Matt Murray, with Korpisalo, bringing different guys in, Anton Forsberg is shown that he's got a consistent level of play that's respectable enough to be kind of a 1B in this league, in my opinion. And
Right.
I think Ottawa is going to have a pretty good duel, and it might be just above. It might be above league average for the first time in a long time.
I would agree with you. I think Olmark showed last year that he was capable of being a big part of the Boston Bruins team as a whole. I think if you look at where he's at, and obviously the type of goaltender that he is, he's been a starter before. He was a starter in Buffalo, and did really well when he was there. Now he goes to Ottawa, where he's going to basically be the guy. And I think that he's a very good goaltender. He's a guy that won the Vezina just recently, as 2 years ago. So this is a guy who can definitely do it. And I think he's one of the most underrated goaltenders in the league. So I do agree with number three. With Forsberg, I mean, look, he's a backup goaltender that last year couldn't stay healthy, and had a rough season. I think this year, playing less games, and I think the pressure also of the fact that Korpisalo didn't play well last year and they were reliant a lot more on Forsberg, I think played a factor. I think this year, not being, let's say, the biggest factor, and just kind of playing his game. If Olmark stays healthy, I think we'll be fine for Forsberg. And I think as a backup, he's a decent backup. Like he'll do the job when asked and when called upon. At number 4, we're gonna go with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and most importantly, we're gonna go with Andrei Vasilevsky and Jonas Johansson. Obviously, Vasilevsky at number 4. He's a great goaltender. Look, this guy's won multiple Stanley Cups, Vezinas. He was one of the best goaltenders in the league. The problem with Vasilevsky is last year, he came off of an injury, and had not a very good season from his standards at all. And I think that we saw some sort of regression with Vasilevsky last year. The other thing with Tampa that lets them down is Jonas Johansson. I think Jonas Johansson last year was a very inconsistent goaltender. He had a very good, let's say, beginning of the year, and then he kind of slowed down as the year went on. Wasn't really at his best. I know last year was probably one of the better years that he had, but even then, it's hard to tell what type of goaltender you're going to get with Jonas Johansson. And even with Vasilevsky, I think the inconsistency that goes into it, the fact that he's a starting goaltender, the fact that he came off of surgery last year and he didn't have a great year. I think there's a lot of uncertainty going into the season, and so I think just based on that, I think that's why we have him at number 4. It's just hard to predict where he's going to be this year compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I think the hard part was deciding between 3 and 4, obviously Ottawa and Tampa, because you don't know what Vasilevsky you're getting this year.
Right.
But I think you're going to get him back to a certain capacity. He won't be, as he struggled when he came back last year. I believe he had just a 900 or a 905 save percentage in the games that he did play. But now, with a full off season to get fully healthy, I think you'll at least get 80% back of what the player he was just a couple of years ago. The guy who's able to steal games and who is just a monster in the net. He would dominate the net, and with his size and his ability to just be in the right position to track the puck. He was able to dominate games for Tampa, and if you could get that back, then this whole conversation changes. But obviously, Jonas Johansson is a big question mark, and Vasilevsky with his health. So we have Tampa at number 4, but I think there's a gap between them and the team that we're going to put at number 5. And
Okay.
the team at number 5 is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Joseph Woll and the
Yeah,
Leafs. And this one's a tough one because you can argue that, like, look, they haven't, always been at their best. They haven't always had the best goaltenders. But the problem is that Joseph Woll last year showed in the playoffs that he was capable of doing it.
he
And
could
I
do
think
it.
he showed all year that he was capable of being the starter for the Leafs. And the fact is that last year, if you look at the Leafs tandem compared to this year, they had Woll and Samsonov. This year they have Woll and Stolars. Stolars just finished winning a cup, and I think he was a decent backup in his time in Florida last year too. And with Woll, if he's healthy, he's underrated and he's very, very good. So I think that it's only fair to have him at 5. I just don't see anybody else from the remaining 3 teams better than Joseph Woll personally.
Yeah, well, Joseph Woll has proven like that he could do it, like you said, and I think just having over Samsonov is just Samsonov was a big letdown for the Leafs last year, and even the year prior, in my opinion. I think Storrs is definitely an upgrade, and they'll have probably a league average, goalie tandem in Toronto, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as they get stable goaltending, I think it'll help out the Leafs and their offensive juggernaut that they are with their top players to do what they want to do and remain competitive. So moving on to number 6. I think this is where we disagree.
Yes.
I'm gonna pick the Buffalo Sabres because I see a lot of upside there with that Lindy Rupp being the head coach and adding some structure, and that is gonna definitely help them out in terms of how they defend the D zone and just as a tactical deployment. And I think it has a rub off effect on their goalies, and it might just elevate them. A guy like Devon Levi, local kid here, is gonna have an opportunity to really he's still growing, he's still young, he's a young netminder. He's gonna have room to grow here. The talent is definitely there. Could it be his breakout year? Maybe, but Luukkonen is played well last year and is capable of being a starter in some capacity. So I like them as a duo. I think they're average as a duo, but I think the upside is there if you get a guy like Levi to take the next step. So, but I have them clearly. I know you're going to disagree, but I have them clearly above the Habs tandem for this season.
Look, I'm gonna disagree with you, but I just look. I think Montembeault has proven that he's capable of being a decent goaltender in this league. However, I will agree that Luukkonen played better than him last year. I do agree with that. The thing with Buffalo, Montreal, I think the reason why it's probably closer than people think is because Caden Primo last year played really well down the stretch, right? And I know that he wasn't the backup all year, and with Primo, there's still some uncertainty as to what he's really going to be in this league. But I think the fact is that if Caden Primo is able to take the next step this year, and I think if Montembeault can improve on the season that he had last year, I think you can argue that he's probably in that conversation of maybe the sixth best goalie in the league. The thing is that Luukkonen played well. Right? Buffalo just wasn't very good last year. And Devon Levi, like you said, there's going to be some maturity that needs to be there. So for that reason, I'm going to throw Buffalo ahead of Montreal just because they're 2 young goaltenders that I think have a lot more to prove and have proven that, they can do it at the NHL level. They just need to find some consistency. I think with Montembeault and Primo, though, it's not as far as they would seem. I think a big year from Montembeault or Primo or both would change that opinion. But until then, I think it makes sense to have, Luukkonen 6, Montembeault 7. And then at number 8, we have Detroit. And Detroit, I mean, look, this is a team that in terms of goaltending is just all over the place. They have 4 goaltenders under contract, which is already a problem in itself. You bring in Cam Talbot, you bring in Alex Lyon, you have, Ville Husso, you have James Reimer, I believe as well. This is a team that for some reason, they just want to carry 4 goaltenders, and they're all not very good. So the thing is with Detroit is if you have to look at every other team in the league or in the division, like Cam Talbot is probably the worst one, and you can even argue that Alex Lyon is probably the worst one. So it by default they're 8th. They've got a mid goaltending.
It might be one of the worst tandems in the NHL because we don't know. Obviously, with Cam Talbot being 37 years old, you don't know when the wheels are going to fall off and if it's going to happen soon, but he wasn't particularly great down the stretch for LA last year. He struggled towards the mid part and later part of the regular season there. And obviously Alex Lyon didn't really do the job for Detroit last year. Husso was hurt for some time, but he was pretty average. James Reimer started more games than you should have. Right now, we're projecting, right, Alex Lyon and Cam Talbot as the two opening night goaltenders. We don't know how training camp's going to go. We don't know what kind of decisions are going to be made with personnel. But right now, if we're basing off Cam Talbot, Alex Lyon, two pretty subpar goaltenders. I mean, it's an easy pick at number 8. It really is.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to the Metropolitan Division, and let's just go right into it. I believe the best goaltending tandem in the Metro is Shesterkin and Quick, personally. Shesterkin's, Vezina winner, Jonathan Quick, Stanley Cup champion, both played really well last year. I think Quick even outplayed Shesterkin at times last year. Quick's a guy that you can get 30 games out of, and he'll be pretty effective. Shesterkin's, a Vezina goaltender. We all know what he's capable of doing. He's one of the best goaltenders in the league. You can even argue he probably is the best goaltender in the league. It depends who you ask. So for that reason, I think it's unanimous to have Igor Shesterkin at number 1, personally.
Yeah, I definitely think. Look, he's been proving it. Regular season, postseason, Shesterkin is that guy. Jonathan Quick, I love him in a smaller role at his age with his durability. Obviously, he could still put up above average performances in a smaller sample size. They're at number 1, but I think the gap with 1 and 2 is pretty close, and I think my number 2 have to be the other team in New York and Long Island, specifically the Islanders with Sorokin and Varlamov. Obviously, Varlamov, I think, is just a perfect backup over there. He consistently puts up good numbers. Stabilizing forces at number 2, and obviously Sorokin has that ability like Shesterkin does. He was the reason they made the playoffs 2 years ago. Let's not forget about that.
Yep.
With a very bang average team. They had his numbers weren't great last year, but they did have a coaching change midseason, and before that, it was a little bit lackluster in terms of their team defense. Sorokin is going to be back this year. You could trust me on that one. With Patrick Roy as the coach, the team that's going to be a lot more structured. And Sorokin is in that conversation of top 10 netminders in the league, and backed up by a pretty experienced and savvy goaltender and Semyon Varlamov. So I think they're a clear-cut number 2.
I would agree. I think with Sorokin, I don't know if he's going to be there for the start of the year. I know that he's dealing with a little bit of an injury, but even still, he's the second best goaltender in the Metropolitan Division. I think you could argue, like you said, it's pretty close between him and Shesterkin. The thing with the Islanders is their goaltending is probably the least of their worries in terms of where they're at as a team. Varlamov last year played really well. Sorokin last year came in, wasn't fantastic, but definitely wasn't bad. So I think that, this year, if the Islanders are going to take a step, it's obviously going to be based on their goaltenders. And you could, you look at Ilya Sorokin. This is a guy that, if Igor Shesterkin wasn't around, he'd be the best goaltender in the Metro, bar none. So, very good goaltender, playing on a team that's a little bit mediocre, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to number 3, we have the newly acquired Jacob Markstrom of the New Jersey Devils. The reason I have him at number 3, or the reason we have him at number 3, is because he's a very good goaltender that last year played on a team that wasn't very good. And I think Jacob Markstrom has proven that he's capable of being a starter. I think he's proven that if you put him on a good team and you give him a solid decor, he can do some damage, and he can really prove what type of goaltender he is. And I also think that Jake Allen is a very good backup option as well for them. I think Allen last year, I know it was a down year for him in Montreal before getting traded to New Jersey, but I think even still, he proved that, when he went to New Jersey, that he did still have some game in him. I think if you give this guy 25 games, even 20 games, I think he could be a really decent backup for you. And he's a guy with experience, right? He did it under Carey Price when he was in Montreal. Now he's going to do it under Jacob Markstrom. I think there's a very good chance here that New Jersey could have a really good year. And I think a lot of that is going to be based on their goaltending. So I like Markstrom. I think he's very good. And if I have to look at the list of goaltenders in the Metro, I think number 3 is fair for Jacob Markstrom personally, and obviously Jake Allen.
Yeah, well, they needed a stabilizer in the net. They got one. Nemjelkovic Sorry, not Nedeljkovic.
Vanacek.
Vanacek, sorry, wasn't what they expected last year after 2 years ago being a guy that was able to take them to the playoffs. They obviously acquired Jake Allen later into the season last year, and Jake Allen is I think an experienced backup, and you shouldn't expect anything more. But in that position, he should be able to thrive. I think they're going to be a good duo. And then at number 5, I was thinking either Carolina or Washington here.
Well,
But upon reflection, I would give the slight edge to Carolina.
I
But
would agree with you.
I do think they get better. Washington does get better in the net. Obviously,
I
Darcy
agree.
Kemper wasn't great last year. They were a playoff team, yes, but their goal differential was minus 35. They weren't a great hockey team.
Right.
Any other year they don't make the playoffs or they don't win as many close games as they did. Lindgren stood on his head. I think he has a chance to bounce back this year with a very stabilized decor. With the additions of Matrois and Jacob Chikrin. He'll be there and obviously well supported with like a perfect 1B in Thompson, who did it for a number of years in Vegas and who was an important asset for them. So I think they upgraded their tandem nonetheless. But with Freddie Anderson in Carolina, I give the slight edge because of the experience and because of the consistent caliber of the player.
I agree. I would say, like, look, Freddie Anderson's a guy that has had experience, like you said. I think he's proven that when he's healthy, he's very solid and he's a very good goaltender. Last year, I think when he came back from injury, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he went 9-0 before losing his first game. So there's clearly, he's clearly a very good goaltender on his day and when he's healthy. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. And then Charlie Lindgren last year really came out of nowhere and really played some fantastic hockey. He was one of the main reasons why the Caps made the playoffs. I think this year, obviously, with the addition of Logan Thompson as well in net, I think it makes Washington's goaltending core a little bit better. So I think at 5, it makes sense, especially with what's left in the Metro. I think that Lindgren proved last year that he was better than Tristan Jarry, and that's why I have Jarry and Nedeljkovic at 6, because you can argue that Jarry last year was very, very inconsistent.
Yeah.
It was a guy that I think he ended the season with 6 shutouts, but he also ended the season with like an 894 or 896 or something like that. So put that into perspective, that he had 6 shutouts and still ended with an 896. So you never know what you're going to get with Tristan Jarry. And that's, I think, one of the biggest concerns with the Penguins is what type of goaltender are you going to get? I think Nedeljkovic played well. And I think he showed that he was capable of playing a lot more games this year. I think maybe this year it might be a little bit more of a rotation compared to a 1A, 1B type thing, or a starter and a backup type thing. But either way, I still think the Capitals edge out the Penguins in terms of goaltending,
Yeah.
and that's why I have Pittsburgh at 6.
Yeah, with Pittsburgh, what I'll add is that Tristan Jarry, just to confirm, had a 903 save percentage last year.
Okay, so
About the shutouts, you were right. He had 6 shutouts, but they actually had a losing record they had a winning record with Nedeljkovic, and they had a losing record with Tristan Jarry, 19 wins, 25 losses. So
yeah, so there you go.
He wasn't necessarily a guy that was able to take them over the hump last year, but Nedeljkovic played well, and I think it's a wait and see. Obviously, I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be better this year, but that duo is still. I think it could be a little shaky.
I agree. Let's move on to the 2 guys that I added on the list: Elvis Merzlikins and then Samuel Ersson. Merzlikins last year struggled. There's no, I think, 2 ways to put it.
Yeah.
The thing is, what we're gonna do, or what the way we look at it, or the way I look at it, is Merzlikins has more experience, and I think that although he struggled last year, I think it's unfair to really criticize him solely. I don't think the team was necessarily the best either, and I think that Merzlikins has something to prove as well, in the sense where this is a guy that is looking for a bounce back. He had asked for a trade originally, and now he wants to prove that he's still a decent NHL goaltender in the league. I think he's a little bit better than Sam Ersson. I think Ersson last year in Philly just had a really good start, like played really, really well at the beginning, but at the end of the season he was burnt out, and I think it showed that maybe he wasn't able to handle a starter's workload. And then Ivan Fedotov came in and didn't look promising either. So I'm not too, let's say, excited about what Philly's goaltending looks like. And for that reason, I think I have to have them last. Just because with Merzlikins, you kind of know what you're going to get, and you might get a guy who can steal you games. Whereas with Urson and Fedotov, they haven't played enough, and we haven't seen enough promise from either of them to really say like, yeah, okay, they're going to have a good season. You know what I mean? So for that
Yeah.
reason, I have Philly at 8 and Columbus at 7.
Yeah, I think it's still a wait and see. I think the experience, like you said, goes in Columbus's favor. So that wraps it up for the Metro. Moving on now to the Western Conference. Excuse me. We'll start with the Pacific Division. So,
Right.
Luca, who's your number one in the Pacific?
So this one's a little bit tough. The only reason it's tough is I'm gonna just say one thing. There's a potential that Thatcher Demko might not play the start of the year. So I
Yeah,
don't know how we want to rank this, but technically, if we're going based on the fact that he's healthy, then by default, I would put Thatcher Demko at 1 just because he's the best goaltender in that division.
yeah. I
Um,
think we could say that let's say we're considering Thatcher Demko doesn't miss more than 10 or 15 games here. I
okay,
think you
sure.
could still it doesn't really affect the rankings, and I would agree with you. Thatcher Demko in the Pacific Division is the guy. There's another
Yeah.
guy I like a lot at number 2, but I think Thatcher Demko is the guy undisputedly. He was fantastic last year. A big part of why their defensive numbers in Vancouver were so good. He really helped that decor a lot, and he was able to stand on his head at times, consistent throughout the whole year. A great bounce back year for him. So I love Vancouver's tandem at number 1, and at
I
number
would
2,
I would agree.
yeah. So at number 2, here's where things get interesting because you have teams like the San Jose Sharks with Askarov now. You have obviously the Edmonton Oilers, who I'm not so fond about. And then you got teams like the LA Kings, not the Arizona Coyotes. We got the Utah Hockey Club, right? So,
But they're
and
in
the
the
Vegas.
they're in the Central, so it's Utah's in the Central, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah,
Okay, yeah, my bad about that. But you also get the Vegas Golden Knights there, and you get
right.
this is who I mixed them up with. Believe it was the Seattle Kraken.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and then you get the
I get it
Anaheim
mixed
Ducks.
up too. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not always
I'm still getting used to hockey in Utah as we all are, right? So
facts.
um I'm just gonna say it like it might not be a sexy opinion, but I like Aiden Hill a lot. I don't like
Um,
Samsonov, but I like Aiden Hill a lot. So I'm gonna give the edge now to Vegas because I think Aiden Hill obviously was a hero for them when they won the Stanley Cup. Was great last year. I think that he had his best regular season numbers, and I think he's a goalie now who's really grown into his game. And I don't want to bet against a guy like Aiden Hill.
I'm gonna agree with you. I think that Aiden Hill, last year when he was healthy was really, really good for Vegas. I think the problem with Vegas last year was the fact that they dealt with a lot of injuries. And I think that Aiden Hill showed that, the year that he won the cup, that, he was a very good, legit goaltender. He's solid, he's steady. It's just a matter of staying healthy. And then at number 3, I put Stuart Skinner there. I think by
I disagree.
default, really. I think
Yeah,
that Stuart Skinner, compared to what's left, and the reason I'm looking at what's left is because Darcy Kemper in LA, no. Joey Decord in Seattle, not really.
Joey D.
Uh, then you have Anaheim with Dostal, maybe. You have San Jose with Askarov. And then you obviously have Calgary with Dan Vladar. I just think that I think what's going to put me over the edge is the fact that I think Stuart Skinner showed in the playoffs last year that he was maybe better than people give him credit for. Now, am I saying that he's the reason the Oilers made the final? No, but I'm saying that he played very well. And I'm saying that he had some really good games and he stole a couple of really good games. And I think for that reason, you cannot oversee Stuart Skinner because I think he played well enough last year in the playoffs to where he earned his right to be in that conversation personally. Now, you could disagree with me, but I just think that he did enough to prove that he's probably the third best goaltender in the Pacific Division.
I don't disagree with that. He currently is probably the third best in the division. But my number 3 is actually a little different. I'm going with the Calgary Flames.
What?
I've been big on Dustin Wolf.
Jesus.
I think he's had the time to develop now. He's gonna be, taking on the reins of Markstrom, but obviously Daniel Vladar is a good backup, and Dustin Wolf, I think, is gonna have a breakout. Might not be the best Calgary Flames team this year, but I think he'll have a chance to break out. And I like their tandem better because Edmonton's backup situation is pretty much inexistent. Let's be honest, and Stuart Skinner is still. I mean, he's proven it. You're going to get a decent floor with Stuart Skinner, but I think the upside is there with Calgary. So I'm going to go Calgary on number 3 instead. But I'm guessing they're your number 4 or your number 5.
I mean, okay. The way I looked at it was I had Stuart Skinner at 4, and then I had Seattle at 5 with the cord, and then I had Wolf at 6. Sorry. I had the cord at 4, and I had Wolf at 5. The reason being is I think the cord did really well last year for Seattle, and I know that Grubauer is not the best, but I mean, the cord played well enough that, there's really the goaltenders in the Pacific are not very good either. So that's the problem. And then Wolf at 5, because I think Wolf's got a lot of upside. And then kind of the way I round this off is pretty fascinating, but it's kind of crazy. But I have Dastal at 6. And then I have Kemper at 7, and I have Askarov at 8. And that's not to try to disrespect Askarov, but the reason this is the way I have it is because Wolf last year proved that he was capable of doing it. He was one of the best goaltenders in the AHL, came into the NHL, looked really good. The style at 6 wasn't the problem in Anaheim. I think he showed last year that, he could play a lot more games and be a solid goaltender. So I have him at 6, and I think that if the Ducks were better, he'd be a better goaltender. Although I don't really like John Gibson per se, but either way, I still think he's better. Then you have, actually, let's switch this. Then you have Askarov and you have Mackenzie Blackwood. Now, Blackwood last year played well. Askarov, like he's gonna probably be. I'm putting him as a starter, but he might be as a 1A, 1B. But either way, Askarov showed in the AHL that he's great, and I'm just not high on Kemper. I don't think Kemper's great. I don't think Riddick is that good either. I think LA have the worst goaltending in one of the worst goaltending duos in the league, in my opinion, personally. So that's kind of how I have it. I don't know if you have it.
And it's not even worse, I would say, than their tandem last year, and they were still able to make the playoffs. So you get a guy like Kemper. He's 34 years old. It's gonna be it's not his first stint with the club. He's had success there in the past. But he was bad last year. Like, he wasn't good. I still see a little bit of a bounce back. So how I view it differently is I like Askarov a lot as a prospect, and I think he's gonna flourish, and he'll be in a different conversation in a year or two. But I think for this season, I'd still have LA ahead. But with the Anaheim pick at 6, I think I completely agree with that.
Okay.
It's just obviously Seattle would have been my 5, and Edmonton my 4, and obviously I said Calgary my 3. But yeah, so for the last 2, I think LA should be given more benefit of the doubt there. I know Dave Rittich had some better numbers down the stretch last year, so that's what I'll say about them. Obviously, it's not a sexy duo by any accounts, but I wouldn't say just because they were a playoff team with stable goaltending last year, I wouldn't put them as the worst tandem in the league.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I'm gonna change it in that sense and have Askarov last, because as much as we like Askarov, I don't think it's fair to put him ahead of Kemper simply for the fact that he hasn't really proven anything at the NHL level yet. Really, he's only played 2 games, so
and Blackwood is
hard to judge.
Yeah, and Blackwood is going to be a nice reliever for him, but Blackwood still has his inconsistencies too. He's not really a starter. But yeah.
Moving on to the final division, the Central Division. So obviously we have Colorado, we have Dallas, we have the Winnipeg Jets, we have the St. Louis Blues, we have the Utah Hockey Club, we have the Minnesota Wild as well. We have the Chicago Blackhawks, and I believe I'm missing one more. Nashville.
Yeah.
So
Dallas Stars.
this one is going to be probably, in my opinion, along with the Atlantic, the toughest one to predict. And the reason I say that is because I'm high on 3 goaltenders, okay? And all 3 of them could make a case for number 1. But I don't know where we're going to go with this. I don't know where you're going to go with this. I personally think UC Saros should be number 1. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if you agree with me on that. You might not.
It's you know what? For number 1 for me, it's honestly it's really tough, man. Especially with Hellebuck and obviously Jake Ottinger also in the same division. That's a tough one to call. And I like Lankinen as the backup for Saros too.
Well, he's not the backup anymore. He's not the backup anymore. It's Wedgwood. Lankinen might go to Vancouver though, because he didn't re-sign in Nashville.
Okay, so Lankinen didn't re-sign, so Wedgwood's there.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, man. This is and Kakinen obviously is going to be the backup in Winnipeg.
Here's I'm gonna put it on the screen. Tell me if you somehow kind of agree with me, okay? So I have it like this. The reason I have it like this, and I'll state my reasons in a second, okay? Nashville, in my opinion, Saros last year played really, really well, and getting Wedgwood as a backup is a really good complementary piece to Lankinen. Hellebuck and Brossoit last year were solid, both of them together. I think Hellebuck was one of the best goaltenders in the league last year, and I think Brossoit was one of the best backups. So that's why I have him there. Ottinger.
Well, Brossoit is not there anymore. It's going to be Capo Kakinen as their backup.
Oh, boy. Okay, even worse. So then in that case, I'll do this. Ottinger was good. I think Casey DeSmith as their backup is an interesting one. But I like it like this. I think 1, 2, and 3, but this is like it's not really a 2 and 3. It's more like a 1A, 1B, 1C type thing. But like,
yeah,
technically, this is how I would have it. Now, people might disagree. I think you could put it either way and it would work. I just think Saros last year proved that he's the best goalie, probably in the league. I think he was really good, and
yeah,
I think with
from
how
February
good
on, I mean, the guy really elevated that team to make them turn it around, especially in February and make the playoffs.
Right.
I love him. I think he's one of the best technical goalies in the league.
Right.
And Hellebuck too had a fantastic year last year. One of
you know what, man? Nah, Hellebuck second. Hellebuck second. Yeah, Hellebuck second. Ottinger third. Ottinger had a down year last year compared to Hellebuck and Saros, and I think for that reason, I don't think his backup's any better than it was last year. I think Ottinger's going to need to step up. I think 1 Saros, 2 Hellebuck, 3 Ottinger is fair. Personally,
yeah, I could agree with that, but I don't know. I would even give the edge to Winnipeg in this one, like the slight edge, but I don't disagree with this. I don't disagree with it that much.
So like this,
yeah, Hellebuck is that guy.
Let's do that. Let's go Hellebuck 1, Saros 2, Ottinger 3. I think that's more than fair. So let's do that.
Yeah, well, they both, I think, in my opinion, elevated pretty. Winnipeg was a team with a great record last year, but I think they had trouble scoring goals a lot of times, and Hellebuck really gave them the edge in getting a lot of games.
Yeah.
They expect that from him again this year. It's tight. I love Saros. I love Hellebuck. It's 1A, 1B, and I think it's like Dallas is more of my 2, and Jake Ottinger is obviously an elite netminder himself. So for number 4 now, I guess it could get interesting. You got the Minnesota Wild have a decent tandem.
St. Louis.
Mrazek was good last year. I don't like Colorado at all. You got St. Louis.
Okay, here's how I see it. here's how I see it. Okay. Where is he? 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 Okay. Connor Ingram at 4. Is it Fleury or Gustafson? Gustafson played more games, so let's go Gustafson at 5. Mrazek at 6. Wait, yeah, 6
And Brossois the backup there.
in Chicago.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, let's do this. Sorry, this.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then who am I missing? Colorado. Oh no, on the Blues. Okay, so Hofer, and then Georgiev. I don't rate Georgiev at all. I think Georgiev or Ananen. I think they were. Ananen was good last year. Georgiev not really. Hofer is a tough one because Hofer I think is a decent goalie, but I don't think he's necessarily a starter. And then same thing with Binnington. Binnington's like really inconsistent. Like he's one of the most inconsistent goalies in the league. He's basically another version of Tristan Jarry, essentially. So having him at 7. Minnesota, I like. I think from a nostalgia standpoint, I'm still a big fan of Marc-Andre Fleury, even though last year wasn't his best year. I'm going to argue that putting Marc-Andre Fleury there is more of like a nostalgia thing, but I still think he's good enough to where I'd have him over Georgiev or over Hofer or Binnington. And I think Gustafson's still better than both of them. Mrazek was really good last year for Chicago, regardless of how bad the team was. And Connor Ingram really took a step last year for Arizona. You could argue that if the team had a little bit more offense and maybe was a better team overall defensively, they probably would have made the playoffs. But I think this year with Utah and with just the hype of being a new team and whatever, I think they're going to be even more exciting to watch. And I think Connor Ingram and Karel Vejmelka are going to play big roles in that for sure. So that's kind of how I have it. I don't know if you want to move things around or not, but that's kind of how I have this this ranking at least.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one to move around, honestly, because for me, Utah and
It's
Chicago
all a bunch of mid.
It's to me, Utah and Chicago could be intertwined. It's just I like the duo in Minnesota as well. It's just Gustafson. I'm hoping for a bounce back here from him.
Right.
His numbers weren't great at all. He had a sub 900 save percentage, I believe, last year or just around. St. Louis is very mid.
Do you want to move?
And Georgiev is just not a starter, in my opinion. He's just not a really good team.
Do you want to move?
I wouldn't even move it around. I would actually just leave it status quo.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that I would maybe move is Hofer and Gustafson, but that's about it. I think everything else is pretty good. I think we should just keep it like this. Damn. I think that's a pretty interesting tier list. I think it's got some interesting opinions on it. I think obviously this we disagreed on. This line here. I think we could have done it either way. I think you had Wolf here, you had the Cord here, and you had Skinner like that. I have it more like this. I think it's interchangeable either way.
I think the Metro is the only one where we really agreed on everything, and in the Atlantic, obviously, the Sabres Montreal one was the one we kind of debated on, and
I like it. I think it's a good tier list. I think we did a decent job. I wonder what other people are going to think in the comments. So, guys, obviously, thanks, guys, for watching the video. We really appreciate the support. And obviously, get ready, guys, because the season is about to start. Training camp, I believe, opens on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So, enjoy the season, boys. We're going to be back with some more videos for sure. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, click like to obviously like the video, subscribe as well, and stay tuned for some more content. We really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys. Peace.